Hi, and welcome to Dip In and Out with Lucy, the podcast that opens up the discussion around domestic abuse. I'm here this morning with Caron Kipping. Caron is a domestic abuse specialist. She is a separation and divorce coach as well. And Caron very kindly did a guest blog on ydom.co.uk all around, is it abuse if my partner doesn't hit me, which is a very big question that I think a lot of people would like the answer to. And so a bit more from you, Caron, about you.
Thanks, Lucy. It's so great to be here. I love raising awareness and, starting these discussions, because the more awareness people can have about it, the better and the safer everybody is.
Yeah.
So just a bit of background about me. I am a survivor of domestic abuse myself. I've been there, done that, got the T-shirt. And for the last kind of 16 years or so, I've worked within the charity sector, supporting victims of domestic abuse. But then alongside that, I retrained as a divorce coach as well. So now I have my own practice where I do one-to-one sessions with clients who are coming out of generally coercive relationships. So very emotionally abusive, financially abusive relationships. There's usually a lot of conflict around the children. They may be going through family court, etc. A lot of post-separation abuse.
Yeah.
So that's me. I also wrote a book called Recognition to Recovery. Again, as a self-help tool for people to help them recognise and understand what abusive behaviour looks like, because it's not always about the physical abuse. And there's lots of tools and strategies in that book, practical ways that can help you get through the day-to-day dealing with these kinds of people.
Oh well, and that's a heck of a lot.
Well, yeah, it is a lot. There's always something, and you need to understand not only how their brain works, but how they are motivated. You need to understand how their behavior impacts on you as well.
Yes.
Because that's really important to understand what triggers you, what, kind of triggers that emotional panic, overwhelm, anxiety, worry, fear, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But then importantly, you need to understand how to manage it, because they are always going to be the same. And if you live in that constant hope that they're going to change, or hope that things are going to get better in terms of their behavior, you are constantly setting yourself up for disappointment.
Oh my God, that is so true.
Yeah.
So
true. You have to get smarter, you have to think strategically, and you have to get ahead of the game. Right.
Yes.
And know how to shut them down, essentially, because you want to get on with your life, right? If you've separated from them, you've separated from them for a reason, right? You want to get your life back on track. Yeah. And it's absolutely doable. That's important to say. It is absolutely doable, but it takes work.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything that's worth doing, it's going to take some effort. And consistent effort, isn't it? Because I think
consistent effort is key. There is no magic wand that is going to make this better overnight. You have to put the work in to your recovery.
Yeah.
And there's obviously different ways that you can do that. And you don't want to get stuck reading everything on narcissism and, joining every Facebook group going. You have to kind of compartmentalize it. You have to do a certain amount of work on the understanding, a certain amount of work every day on recovery tools. But you also have to shift your focus away from thinking about your ex all the time, right? You need to put your energy into creating the new life that you want.
Yeah, God, you know what? It is so true. Everything you were just saying, I was thinking, yep.
You have to work on each of those things in balance. So one of the techniques I talk about in my book is the ABC technique. So the A is your action plan. That's the practical stuff you can do to change your situation and make it better.
Yeah.
So that might be sending an email. It may be, doing a bit of research. It may be doing a bit of reading. It may be finding out what your rights are and your options are. So it's the action plan. Who do I need to talk to? What do I need to do to improve my situation?
Yeah.
But if that's all you're working on, it can be exhausting. It can feel very negative. It can feel hard. It can feel really tough.
Yeah.
So we have to balance it out. So your B of your ABC is your building resilience. So that is also at the same time as working on your actions, working on how do I make myself calmer? How do I cope better? How do I build up that resilience so that the things that are difficult don't affect me as much? So that is diarising in time for yourself, diarising in time with friends, diarising in time to go for a walk or go to the gym or do a bit of meditation or yoga or, listen to a podcast, it's going to help me feel better.
Yeah.
And then you'll see is you're creating a happier future. So that is shifting your focus from what's already happened and what's happening now to looking forward. You need to have things to look forward to.
Yeah, absolutely.
You need to have a goal, right? You need to have some sense of light at the end of the tunnel, right? So it could be just planning something nice for the weekend. It could be just saying, do you know what? I haven't seen my friends for ages. I'm going to book something in and make sure I make the effort to be connected with them. It could be planning a holiday, a celebration holiday.
Oh, I like that. Oh, I love that.
If you've got to the end of your divorce or whatever,
Yeah, that's a good one.
You need to have things to look forward to. And if you work on all of these things, kind of almost in synergy, then it just creates a bit more calm, a bit more balance, and a bit less overwhelm.
Yeah, that's the key word, isn't it? Overwhelm. Because when you've got, like you were saying earlier, all the things could be going on, family court, you're dealing with the post-separation abuse aspect, there's potential children involved, all those kind of things, and maybe a house to sell, or God alone knows.
It's a lot.
So many.
You're juggling a lot. You're taking on a lot of emotional stuff.
Yeah.
As well as trying to process and figure out how you got here.
Yeah. How the hell did I end up here? Yeah.
Exactly. It's a lot to deal with. So one of the ways that I help people also is through group work and training. So I have a new program starting in October, on the 18th of October, which I'm so excited about.
Ooh.
It's called the Recognition to Recovery Insights program.
Right.
And it's for a small group of women. And group work is so powerful because when you have been in these kind of relationships, you are incredibly isolated.
Yes.
You feel like you are the only person that's gone through this, heard this, experienced this. And when you come into a group, all of a sudden you start to realize, oh no, I'm not alone. And the things that have been said to me are actually the same things that have been said to that lady and that lady. And that
pick bits out and go, I relate to that. Yeah.
Exactly. So we deep dive into tactics. First of all, recognizing a specific tactic each week, really kind of understanding it so we can recognize it as a tactic. So that when you hear certain phrases or you see them do certain things, you go, that's a typical isolation tactic. That's a typical persuasion tactic. That's a typical bullying tactic.
You can spot it then,
And you can spot it at 100 paces. And when you can spot it like that in an email or in a telephone call or in a letter or just through their behavior, it doesn't affect you as much because it's not personal. It is a tactic.
That's part of their emotional thing, is the tools that they use, isn't it? And they are tools,
Yeah, they are absolutely tools, and they are so stereotypical. Honestly, if I heard, if you leave me, I'm going to kill myself. If you leave me, I'm going to do this. I'm going to report you to social services.
You'll ruin me if you do this.
They say all the same things and do the same things. But for us who are trying to help people, it's great because they are so predictable.
Yes, and that's the word. That is the word, predictable.
They're so predictable. So we can tell you exactly everything that they are going to say and do. So you can get ahead of the game and you can let go of the sense of guilt that you feel for not having spotted it sooner.
Yeah.
I hear a lot of women say to me, oh my God, I must be so thick
I'm
because
stupid.
I
Yeah.
didn't spot it.
Yeah.
How did I not see this coming? But you don't,
It's
because it
subtle.
drip feeds in.
Yeah.
So, in the program and in the one-to-one work that I do, I can help you process that, and I can help you let go of that guilt, because it's not your fault. You
No.
didn't crystal ball. They weren't the person at the beginning of the relationship,
I am.
that they were at the end, right?
Yeah.
You were duped into it.
Yeah, definitely. And it's funny because I did a blog a while ago, and I posted it on LinkedIn, and I think it sort of stirred up almost controversy, because I was talking about, can you ever forgive? And what if people went and read the blog, what you find is, what I'm actually saying is, I'm not talking about forgiving the perpetrator, I'm talking about forgiving yourself.
Yeah.
Because you have to forgive the fact that what could have, would have, should have happened, in fact, didn't happen.
Yeah.
And it is coming to terms with the fact that you can't change the past. It's such a simple concept, but if you learn to forgive that and let that go and say, you know what, I can't change it, but what I can do is find a freedom from it.
Yes.
And I can take step by step each day
Yes.
towards a better life, towards a better future, but I can forgive myself. And I think that's
Yeah.
a big misconception, is we don't have to forgive the perpetrator. We need to forgive ourselves for not being able to spot it. Well, like you said, it's so subtle, it's so drip, drip, drip. You can't spot it. And when you're in it, it's very easy. I always think this is what it's very easy for people to judge and say, well, she chose to stay. She chose that. You can't judge somebody by your own life, because what kind of comparison is that? You don't know.
That's right.
What goes on behind closed doors. You don't know what's going on in someone else's life.
That's right. And even if you have been through it, you can't judge somebody else, because everybody's situation is slightly different.
Yeah.
And everybody can cope with things differently. Everybody has to make their own choices at their own time.
Yeah.
What worked for you may not necessarily work for somebody else who's also in an abusive situation.
Yeah.
Their situation may be slightly different. They may have other challenges. They may have other needs, other concerns, so there is absolutely no judgment, when we do group work and when we talk to people, there is absolutely no judgment. There is nothing that is ever too shocking.
That's what I always, because that's so
but we have to let go. We have to let go of that guilt, because that's the only way that you can move on. You have to let go of the past. It is what it is. You can't change it, right?
No.
You only knew what you knew at the time. And if nobody ever educated you on what a healthy relationship was, how were you supposed to know?
Yeah. That's a big bugbear of mine. Education is key, isn't it?
And this is part of the ethos of the program. You come out of it educated, smarter, clearer, to make damn sure you never get into that situation again.
And that's a biggie, because I think a lot of the time, what doesn't get, obviously we are getting to that point where we are talking about domestic abuse more. We are able to do things like this, and people aren't going, oh gosh, they've mentioned those dreaded words. But I think one thing that doesn't get talked about very often is how often you go from one domestically abusive situation to another. It's not uncommon to leave one person, especially if you're quite young as well, say, I don't know, 18, something like that. And you found yourself in this relationship where you think it's love. We all think we've fallen in love and that's it. It's wonderful. And then they start displaying these characteristics and these, personality types and everything else that's very textbook. They give you the feeling that they're protecting you, but actually what they're doing is possessing you. So you're not allowed out with your friends, or you're not allowed to do this. But then once, for whatever reason, as a lot of relationships do when you're 18, 19, start to fall apart, and maybe you go off and work, university, whatever, and you find yourself falling into another situation, another relationship, because you think that that's love. You've decided, because
especially if this relationship seems better than the previous one. You can be lulled into a false sense of security and go, well, that one was really awful,
and they'll never do that.
This one's great, because they're not putting me down all the time. They're not intimidating, threatening me. This one's amazing, right? You get lulled into that false sense of security. But if you don't keep checking in with yourself, if you don't keep checking, their behaviors and, you know, reflecting and assessing and going, is this a red flag? Is this something I should be concerned about? Does this feel okay?
Yeah.
Before you know it, you're really deeply into another relationship.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
you haven't really considered whether, first of all, it's the right relationship.
Yeah.
Secondly, do you actually want to be in a relationship, or are you just trying to seek comfort and love from somebody else? You know, a lot of people who've been in abusive relationships jump into another relationship thinking that is going to heal them.
Yes.
Really, no, that is absolutely the wrong time to get into a relationship.
Yeah.
You need a break. You need to figure out who you are.
Who am I? Yeah.
You need to be confident in yourself. You need to love yourself. You need to be happy with your life.
Yeah.
Then if somebody else comes into it and you start a relationship, happy days.
Yeah.
You know, happy days.
You've worked out what you are willing to, because in some time, I think it's even more difficult if you've been through a domestically abusive relationship to then work out what your boundaries are.
Yeah.
Or, you know, because we all have to have a
and
bit
you don't trust your judgment. You don't trust your judgment.
No. And it's hard because you realize that there are certain things you will have to give and take on. In any relationship, there's a certain amount of give and take, but it's working out what is acceptable to be able to give and take on and have that, you know, 50-50.
What are my absolute no-nos?
Yes.
And am I okay to say, I'm sorry, you're not for me? Do I feel confident enough to be able to say that? If you don't feel confident enough to be able to say that to somebody, you should not be getting into any relationship.
I don't mind admitting that my now husband, bless him, got the version of me that I don't think he was prepared for, which was just like, absolutely not. No, unacceptable.
Yeah,
bless him.
But you have to find your voice, and you have to be okay with that, and be absolutely unwilling to lose that again.
Yes, don't let it go. Don't let it go.
No, you can't.
Because when we do fall in love, you know, we soften, don't we? We let our guards down a bit, and that's absolutely fine. But it's like you say, checking in with yourself and recognizing, well, that's normal in a relationship because there should be a certain amount of give and take. This isn't normal in a relationship because it's just me giving and they're taking, or whatever it happens to be. And I think if somebody is worthy of you, that's a big word as well, remembering, because you've got no self-worth when you're going through the situation, and when you come out of this, if you're fortunate enough to come out of the situation, there's so little self-worth that when you do actually find out who you are and what you want from life, then your self-worth is at a point where you can say, actually, no, I am worthy of somebody who is going to treat me with the respect as I will treat them with respect. All those sorts of things that make you think, actually, are they worthy of me? You know, are they?
I always say treat it like an interview. You know, you should be interviewing them. Are you good enough to be in my life? You know, flip it round.
Yeah, exactly.
And because you are worthy, and you've worked flipping hard to get out of that relationship. So you don't want to make yourself vulnerable again. Why would you do that?
Exactly. Why would you put yourself in that situation? And especially, I think it's hard when you have children, because you're not only then thinking of, say, for example, and not everybody wants to head into another relationship. Some people are more than happy to say, I particularly was quite happy to go, you know, well, I'm quite liking this, quite liking being on my own, quite liking being a single mum. This is rather fun. But that's because I chose to view it from that kind of perspective. And I think, you know, especially when children are involved, you do have to be more cautious about becoming involved with anybody in the future if you do, because you've got to think of the children as well. So you're no longer just thinking of yourself. Maybe when you met the perpetrator in the first place, you may not have had children, but now there's not just you to think about, there's other little lives to think about. And that's, you know, I think that's again something people don't probably think about when you're talking about, you know, coming out of a domestically abusive situation, is there's a hell of a lot to unpack. And there's a hell of a lot to protect for yourself, for your children. And there is no harm in taking all the time in the world.
Exactly. Take it slowly.
Yeah.
I always say take it slowly.
Yeah.
That's the positive thing about having children, is that it can kind of almost force you to do that.
Take that time. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And
you could slow it right down.
God, so I wanted to say, so it's the 18th of October, just so I can get that date in. Okay. 18th of October.
Yeah, it's 8 weeks. It's 2 hours a week on a Wednesday evening from 6 till 8, live with me on Zoom, working through the tactics And then importantly, at the end of each session, you have a recovery tool. So something to go away with, something to practice, something to make you reflect and really kind of consider where you are now and where you want to be. And so hopefully by the end of the 8 weeks, you know all the early warning signs as well of abusive and controlling behaviour. So if you do want to date again in future, you don't have to be scared of it.
No.
You know, you can go and do that quite confidently because you know,
safe in the knowledge that you've done the work.
You've done the work. You know, people do these courses, you know, time and again, you know. I know people that have done these kind of courses 2-3 times, you know, at different points because they just want a refresher.
Yes.
You know, they just want a reminder, you know, maybe they have been single for a while. Maybe they have been separated from their ex for a while. They don't want to get lulled into that false sense of complacency and kind of forget what they should be looking for. So it doesn't matter if you are recently separated. It doesn't matter if you've been separated for ages. If you want to do the work and you've never done the work, then you can do it.
You can do it. And I think, you know, everybody's at different, like we were saying before, there are certain similarities within situations, but obviously every situation is unique. But then at the same time, we're all processing and moving forward at different paces. And some people might find, actually, this is why I purposely called the podcast Dip In and Out, because if it makes you feel like, oh, I can't listen to that because that's reminding me too much of this, isn't this? You can just dip in and out when you want. Because again, one thing I always come back to is it's about giving the victim, survivor, however you want to refer to yourself. You can refer to yourself as anything else. I always, Alice Smith was saying in a podcast recently, we need another one after survivor. We've not quite got to that point where we know what the word is yet, but it's so true. And I think the difficulty is that we need to be able to give back that control and that power to the person that basically has had it taken away from them for, you know, God knows how long. And it's important that you know that you do have that power and control. And it takes time to realize that you are in control of your own life and nobody can tell. And again, why I call the website You Don't Own Me, because nobody owns anybody else. We are all, you know, answerable to ourselves as to what we do and don't do.
And whoever you are and whatever you are, that's enough. And you should be yourself and be happy with that. And if you are in a relationship, the other person should be more than happy with that.
Yes, absolutely. And
if they're not, then they're not for you.
So true. And it is, you're right, you know, I think what does get kind of lost in it all is that time to yourself is so important. That time to yourself to just think about what it is you want, what it is you're, you know, trying to work through. Because again, you can feel some days, you can feel like you're absolutely on top of the world. Everything's marvelous. Your life's wonderful. And then something will happen and you can feel like you're back to square one. And you're not, because you've actually recognized how you feel. So you're actually a bit further on than step one, but in your mind, you're thinking, I'm back to square one now. I've reacted the same way as I used to do. I've done this, I've done that. And you can really punish yourself. But actually, that's it. I mean, you're the expert, but I would imagine if you are thinking like that, you're not back to square one, are you? You're actually...
No, it's all learning. It's all learning, you know, and sometimes you do feel more resilient than other times. Sometimes you slip into old habits, right? It takes time to learn new habits.
Yes.
Okay. When you've been in a controlling relationship, you have formed a lot of habits in how you think and how you behave, how you talk to yourself as well. And you have to unlearn those habits and retrain your brain. And that takes time. And sometimes you do slip back, but again, you shouldn't be tough on yourself. You should just go, that's okay. All right. I've realized, you know, how that's happened. That's okay. How do I make sure it doesn't happen again?
Exactly. And when you are, you know, I think because you can't describe to anybody what it's like being in an abusive relationship, is you are a lot stronger than you realize. You know, you are a lot more resilient than you realize. I used to hate that word when people go, oh, you're resilient, you'll be fine, you know, left with no home, no money, you're resilient, you'll be all right.
You don't want to be resilient.
You don't want to be resilient. and it used to really wind me up, saying, why do people keep saying you're resilient, you're resilient? I'm not resilient. I don't want to be resilient. I just want to be happy. That was the only word I could ever come back to, is I just want to be happy. I don't want to have to fight for my happiness. But I think it is worth the effort. It is worth the work. And it definitely, I think then once you start being hopeful and you start thinking more positively about life, it does start to get easier, because you're already projecting into the world that whole kind of what you want from it, you know, and then I think it does get easier. Definitely.
It does. It takes time. And again, everybody is different. You know, it took me years to really kind of let go of what had happened to me. And then I started working in this field as well, and that was difficult to start off with, but then it got easier. And then I think once I started to really find my voice and started to form opinions and, you know, that kind of thing, there was really no stopping me then. So, you know, I'm a bit controversial. I'm a bit outspoken sometimes, but you know, I don't care. It's my voice, it's my thoughts, it's my opinions. If you don't like it, that's your problem. You know, and I am going to stand up for people who don't have a voice. You know, I'm really passionate about that. I will stand up for people who don't have a voice. I will challenge other professionals who don't get it. Because I think, you know, I have to try somehow to create some change, because it's not good enough that we are still here talking about the same things. As you know, what happened to me over 20 years ago, and I'm still seeing women in the same situations. I'm still hearing professionals with the same judgmental attitudes
and excuses,
you know? You know, and there is a lot that needs to improve.
Oh God!
If we are going to have communities that are safer, you know, people that are safer at home, things need to change massively. So we absolutely need to have these conversations, and we need to talk about it with our friends, with our families. We need men to call it out, you know, and take a stand against it. And we need men to come forwards as well when they are victims of abuse as well, you know, and change is happening, but it's slow.
It is that you're right, and it 100% right. And I think one of the things I'm extremely passionate about, and one of the things was talking to Mark Brooks, who's chairman of Mankind Initiative, when he came onto the podcast. And one thing that I am particularly passionate about is when we talk about education, and we talk about, say, secondary school, where teenagers are, for example, my own teenager, you know, my own son, he had the whole kind of conversation in school around healthy relationships. But by the time you're sort of 15, it's a bit late then, because that learned behavior is there. If they have, for example, grown up in a household where there has been abuse, then unfortunately, maybe for that person, that seems normal. For that teenager, that seems like normal behavior. Why are we not talking about this in the latter stages of primary, year 6, when they're preparing to go into secondary school? To me, it should be compulsory that if we have sex education and all the rest that we have in year 6, why are we not calling it out and having that conversation, saying, you know what, you have a right to the boundaries that you have in your life, because then we've got a chance of helping that next generation. The generation now, like you say, 20 years ago, you know, I know the feeling, and we are now the generation that are having to try and deal with it, process it all. And if something doesn't change within the education, you know, kind of arena, then unfortunately, and statistically, you look at children in a class of 30 in year 6, and they're all a lot, you know, more switched on than probably we were when we were that age, and they understand a lot more. There's a lot more spoken about. There's a lot more in social media, etc. But if we give them the tools to say, you are allowed to say no to this, you are allowed to contact somebody and speak to somebody if you don't feel safe, you are allowed to, you know, we should be giving them the voice and that chance to be able to say that actually, out of those 30 children, if we talk about statistics, how many of those children are in an abusive household or potentially could be a perpetrator themselves in the future? Why are we not, you know, calling that out earlier on? And that's something that really, I mean, one day I might get down to campaigning.
The charity that I used to work for do run workshops for children starting from year 7. Because you're absolutely right, you have to get in there at a young age. Obviously, we don't use words like domestic abuse. You know, it has to be age appropriate.
Absolutely.
We used to talk a lot about friendships, secrets, what to do if somebody hurts you, who are your safe people to talk to, that kind of thing.
Which is a lot of the stuff that goes on in the programs for children, isn't it?
Yeah,
in terms of CYP and support work.
And we used to talk about gender as well, because we want to change that kind of stereotypical attitude about gender and, pink jobs and blue jobs and, and what women are capable of and, what is a woman's role, what is a man's role, that kind of thing. We want to change those kind of attitudes as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, there is work going on, but it isn't mandatory, and it does vary from school to school as to how much input they are willing to give to that and how much importance they give to that. I remember some schools saying, well, you can't talk about this and you can't talk about that. And, it's just so frustrating because, the value that education is going to bring,
absolutely. And also, why would you, if I don't understand, if you were a primary school, why would you not want, if you've dedicated your life to being a teacher, head teacher, whatever, why would you not want to protect the children that are in your care and do it to the best of your ability? Now, I know there's a lot that I'm not a teacher, so I wouldn't know. And I know there's a lot that goes on, the paperwork, the this, the that. But actually, you're shaping our future, adults. And if they are not getting those tools to be able to, yes, it's okay to say, well, we talk about, and a lot of schools do that. They talk about being, friends with people and forgiving and all the rest. But there are certain situations where you don't actually have to forgive that person. You don't have to forgive somebody for the way they've treated you. And if all we're going to do is sweep it under the carpet and say, you have to forgive and forget, then actually that's almost endorsing it. That's almost saying like, it's okay. And I do think that it should be 100% mandatory that you have that situation, potentially year 6, where, like you say, age appropriate, doesn't have to be bringing out the words domestic abuse. But if it makes a child think, actually, the way my mum speaks to me, or the way my dad speaks to me, or the way that they treat me, or the way that, or one of my siblings or whoever, it should be something that can be recognised. And I don't think we give kids enough recognition for actually being able to they just don't know where to turn. And again,
that's parents, right. And every time we used to do these workshops in school, we used to get disclosures from children. 100% of the time. Literally every single workshop, we would have a child that would mention something, or a teacher would let us know that there were maybe 2 or 3 children in the class that they had identified as experiencing domestic abuse at home. So, it is going on, whether you choose to ignore it or not. It is happening. And ignorance is not bliss. You can't just go back, like the old-fashioned attitude, if we don't talk about it, then it's not happening. It is happening. And you have a duty of care towards the children to protect them and to give them those opportunities to feel safer and to make those disclosures, and then importantly to act on those disclosures.
Not just I couldn't agree with you more. I totally agree, and I think it is something that should be spoken about more and more, and also for parents to know that they can actually access help through their local charity, whoever it is, and the children can be supported in school. There's all these kind of things that parents don't realise, they don't know.
There's counsellors, there's play therapy that you can get in school, there's mentorship in schools, which can work really well, particularly for older children. There's a kind of more subtle way of supporting children in school without them going to see a counsellor or a therapist.
Somebody outside the school sort of environment.
Exactly. And there are specialist therapists that can see children outside of school if those children, want something completely disconnected from school. So there are options, there is support out there. But challenge your school. If you've got children in school and they are not getting this type of support, go to the head. Say, where is it? Can we get a workshop in school? This is happening to my child, or it may be happening to somebody else in these classes. What are you doing as a school to educate and protect our children? Challenge them.
I love that. I almost want to applaud you now. Go, Karen. I love it. You're right, though. It is. And this is what is the frightening thing. There isn't enough challenging. It's almost like we're all scared of authority. We don't want to challenge it because they know better. Actually, if they haven't experienced domestic abuse themselves or haven't had training and understanding and trauma-informed training where they can actually spot those signs, then how can they support anybody? How can they realise what needs to be done and where those gaps are and where those issues are? It's something that, 100%. And we are going to see. What scares me and what I don't want is in 20 years' time, we're still having these same conversations and we're still saying the same things and we're still seeing the same behaviour displayed by perpetrators because nothing has changed, because it hasn't been stopped before it starts, if you like. It hasn't been at the root of it where it is as a child. These behaviours are being learned. These behaviours are being embedded and it then becomes normalized. And again, something I spoke to Tony Blockley about in our podcast, and he's professor of criminology at Leeds Trinity University, and we were saying about how do you assess risk when he was talking from a policing aspect. How do you assess risk when that person doesn't see themselves as being at risk? And that to me is the last thing you should ever want to see in a situation, is somebody not realizing that their life is in danger. That there are all those signs there, because we've talked about domestic homicide and and there have been signs along the way, and you never want to get into that point where somebody thought, well, that's perfectly normal that a plate came flying at my head or a glass or a fist through a door and I was lucky it wasn't my face. That kind of behavior should not be normal, and we shouldn't consider it as being normal. But unfortunately, living in those, and that's why I think it is important to go back. And there was a quote from Desmond Tutu I love, and he's like, we've got to stop pulling people out of the stream where they are and go back further up the stream and see where they're falling in.
I love that. I love that quote. It's
brilliant. And it always makes me think, yes, it's brilliant, but we're almost like treading water at the minute and trying to get, going against the tide. And if we just went back a bit further and started to maybe try and see where people are falling in, then maybe we'd stand a better chance. But if it was up to us, we'd have it all sus, wouldn't we?
I know, exactly.
Oh, God, take us forever and a day. But you'd written recently, very kindly, a fantastic guest blog, which ties in nicely with what we're talking about, which is it abuse if my partner doesn't hit me? And I think I've spoken to some friends about the blog, and they were just saying it's one of, if especially these people haven't been through a domestically abusive situation or experienced it, and what they were saying is it's the first sort of question that they think they would probably ask them, well, it's not abuse because this didn't happen or that didn't happen. And I think it would be wonderful if you could, just give a bit of a brief overview as to that being the kind of question. What would your answer as a specialist be to that?
Okay, so in most abusive relationships, either there is no physical abuse or the physical abuse doesn't happen until much later on in the relationship. So the stuff that happens before that, the abusive behavior before that, is much more subtle than that, right? So it's what we call coercive control. So it's things like constant belittling, putting you down all the time, constantly criticizing you, isolating you. The quicker they can isolate you from friends, from family, from work, from anybody else, essentially, where they can have as much of your time and attention as possible, the more power they have. Yeah. These relationships are rooted in power and control and wanting to have a sense of power and control over that other person, wanting to keep you down all the time, wanting to confuse you, wanting to destroy your confidence and your self-esteem, your self-belief. So they will do things like criticize your parenting, criticize your appearance, criticize your friends and family. They will make you justify things, justify your decisions, justify your thoughts and your opinions. You're not allowed to have an opinion. You're not allowed to challenge them. Nope. They basically create a set of rules that they don't tell you about, but rules that you must abide by. And then they change the rules without notice, which is not helpful. No. So you can never do anything right. You know, you live in this constant fear of being wrong all the time, which is where we get this walking on eggshells phrase from.
Yes.
So you are constantly living in a state of heightened anxiety, worried about your partner's response, worried about, you know, when is it going to happen again? When are they going to have a go at me again? What am I going to do wrong this time? So it's a constant fear. But at the same time, it leaves you dependent on them.
Yeah.
So you become very dependent on that person, financially, potentially, maybe reliant on them to help you with the children, maybe reliant on them because you're living in their home. You know, maybe you don't have your name on the mortgage. There tends to be a lot of financial abuse. So you maybe don't have access to your own income. You don't have your own bank account. You maybe have no idea what is going on in terms of your finances and the bills and who's paying for what.
Yeah. Or even if they're being paid.
Or exactly. If they are being paid, you may end up running yourself into debt or being kind of persuaded to do things that under normal circumstances you wouldn't necessarily agree to. So you may be persuaded to take out loans in your name. You may be persuaded to do things, you know, sexually that you wouldn't necessarily agree to under normal circumstances. So there's a lot of persuasion pressure that is put on you to do things in a certain way. And then over time, that becomes normal to you. That becomes your way of life, which is why you don't recognize it as abuse, because it drip feeds in very, very slowly.
Yeah.
And interspersed with that are these glimmers of niceness.
Yeah.
You know, that keep you hooked. They keep you hooked in there. So they will be nice to you sometimes. They will compliment you sometimes. They will buy you flowers, take you out for dinner, do the things that you've been asking them to do for ages. They will start doing those things. They will become a great, you know, parent. But it doesn't last. And all that does is it gets you to drop your boundaries, it gets you to back off, and then things go back to their version of normal.
Yeah. And all you ever want to do then is keep getting back to those good moments where you think, well, they can change. Look what they did there. Look how they can behave. And you live in that. And I think the problem is a lot of the time, I think victims, again, correct me if I'm wrong, but they're very much empaths. They're very much compassionate people.
They are fixers.
And they want to think the best of others. So then they judge people by their standards. But the problem is the second you start judging a perpetrator by your standards, then you're in deep water.
You're going to be disappointed hugely, you know, because they are definitely not empathetic. You know, the only person they care about is themselves. They don't care about you. They don't care about their own children. They don't care about anybody else's feelings other than their own. And that is tough to hear, you know, for people that are in these kind of relationships, because you want to believe that they love you. You don't want to believe that they've manipulated you right from the get-go. But unfortunately, that is the truth.
That is the truth.
It's the reality. They target people that are easily manipulated, or they enjoy the satisfaction of breaking a very confident person down over time. And that's why these kind of relationships can happen to anybody, you know.
Absolutely. And there's that myth, isn't there, that there is, and I hate this again, there is a stereotype of what people believe a victim looks like. And actually, you can be as educated you like, you can be a high-flying professional, you can be anything, and still be a victim of domestic abuse. And more often than not, I think the challenge for a perpetrator is if it's somebody that is bright, bubbly, intelligent, funny, all those things, but maybe with a little bit of a lack of self-esteem or a lack of self-worth underneath the surface that they almost see, it's like, well, actually, that's more of a challenge to break that down. Because actually then you go from being this, and I think an important thing to say as well is you will most likely never go back to the person you were before you met the perpetrator. But the one thing I always used to say when I did groups through the charity I work for is, but that's okay, because what you've learned is so important. Why would you want to go back to being the person you were when you met the perpetrator or before you met the perpetrator? Why? You've learned so much. You know, you've
You can be a
educated
better
yourself.
version. You
Yeah,
can be a
exactly.
better version.
A more confident, a happier, a more, you know, experiencing your own self-worth, knowing that you're worth more, all of those things. Why would you want to go? You know, a lot of people say, I lost who I was, but that's okay, because actually what you've become is so much more. And you've learned, and there's the other quote, isn't there? I'm not starting from scratch. I'm starting from experience.
Yeah.
And it is true, because everything that happens in our lives, regardless of what it is, it shapes who we are. And
doesn't have to define you. I always say domestic abuse doesn't have to define you. It shapes you, but it doesn't have to define you.
No, and you don't have to carry that weight all the time. I think sometimes if you can look at it and say, oh my, a lot of the time you say to yourself, how the hell did I end up in this situation? But then hopefully what I would love to think for a lot of people is you get to the point where you go, look where I am now.
Yeah,
you know, look what I'm doing now. And I think sometimes I think that people, if they're in a situation where they want to feel like they're maybe giving back, if they're doing, you know, a bit better, than feeling a bit better and experiencing life and enjoying it, is go and volunteer at your local charity. You know, maybe if you want to give back, because that was very much how I felt so supported by the charity that I was referred into, that actually I wanted then to give back. I wanted somebody else to have that same experience, because there is nothing worse than feeling like you're all alone.
Exactly.
You know, and like you say, when you're going through earlier on, when you were talking about you know, the diarising things and saying, you know, booking sometimes to your friends, go to the gym, go for a walk, do whatever. And I think it's so important, because it is the loneliest place, because as much as people can say to you, oh, I'm so sorry, or one thing that drives me mad is the head tilt. I can't stand the head tilt. It really annoys me, but that's because I'm just such a stubborn person that when people go, are you okay? I feel like going, you don't need to do that. You don't need to tilt your head and go, are you okay? Yeah, I am actually. But it's hard, because I think a lot of the time, like I say, family and friends also need to be educated, because to say to somebody, I know, it's so heartbreaking for the victim and the survivor, because that person doesn't know what you're going through, and they're not putting their head on the pillow at night and dealing with what you're dealing with. And especially if you're going through something like the family court system, or you've got children's services involved, or the police are involved, or whoever, it is a very, very lonely place to be, because no one is going through it but you. You are the sole one going through it. So you need that support around you, and know the times that you need people, know the times that you need a bit of time to yourself, balance it all out. But it's so important, isn't it? Because it can be a very, very lonely place.
It can.
Yeah.
But there is life afterwards.
Oh, there is. Oh, there is.
You know, it's absolutely worth it.
Yeah.
It can take a bit of time to get there.
Yeah.
But it is absolutely worth it.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I've got a great life now, and I got a whole new career out of it.
Well, this is, I was just going to say, if you're not a walking advert to say, this is how life can be, it's just...
Not everybody has to get a career out of it. You know, you can put it behind you completely.
Of course you can. Or you could do what I do, start a website, spend every day talking about it. But you know, I never would have said, if somebody had said to me 10 years ago, I did... an interview recently with talk about Age UK, and as we're starting to get older, mid-40s, etc., that, you know, how do I feel like my confidence has changed in the last 10 years? And it's changed massively. If somebody said to me 10 years ago, you will be starting up your own podcast, which you've never done before, starting a website, connecting with amazing professionals who are willing to give their time to give this information and support out, that I would have said, you're absolutely bonkers, not a chance. But you find I think a lot of the time as well, when you've been through a domestically abusive situation, and if you are able to work through and process what you've been through, then I think you have more chance to know what you want to do with the rest of your life, because you don't want to waste another second again. You
have to find your passion again, whatever that is.
Whatever it is. And it may have changed from what your passion was in your teens or your 20s, but I think it all comes down to knowing that actually I don't want to waste another second. I want to enjoy every single moment of my life, and you know, stop punishing yourself, because you are not to blame.
Yeah, life is for living, not just surviving.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, I like that. Life's for living, not just for surviving. Oh, she's got them all. I love it.
Got them all. I've got a quote for every situation.
Oh my
God,
it
is so true. You know, I speak to a lot of my clients, and they send me photographs and things, of things that they've done, things that they've achieved. They've maybe up a mountain doing rock climbing, or maybe just going to a restaurant. Somebody sent me a photo the other day saying, this is a photo of my dinner. I'm sitting in a lovely restaurant, the same restaurant that my ex always used to say was too posh for us. And I said,
Brilliant.
enjoy every mouthful.
Yeah, savor it, order the best wine.
Yeah.
Enjoy yourself.
It's those kind of seemingly small freedoms that a lot of people take for granted, but when you've been so controlled, you learn not to take those freedoms for granted, and it can be so special. It can really mean so much, and the more that you do those things, you really start to enjoy your life again and really start to thrive.
And you can start off with very little things. I'm going to give an example of tea bags, where you actually get to choose this. If people listen and think, what on earth is she talking about? Starting off by buying the tea bags you like, not what the perpetrator likes, what you like, and you get to drink the tea you want to for the rest of your life, and no one is going to say any otherwise ever again. And it can be something as simple as that. That I know when Sam Fisher, who's the CEO at C.I.C, which was the charity I was involved with, and she was talking about a lady who had, they used to give out parcels and things in accommodation and refuge, and she was talking about nail varnish, and she was saying how this particular person had said, oh my God, I can wear nail varnish. And to the outside world, it's like, what on earth are you talking about? You just put nail varnish on. No, because it's never that straightforward, and you can't judge. This is what we come back to, is nothing anyone will ever say will make you go, oh, I'm not sure about that, because the truth is stranger than fiction, as we all know, many times over. So have the tea, paint your nails, eat in the fancy restaurants, and do what you like, and enjoy every minute.
Exactly.
This is a very hope-filled podcast. Well, you've got the right T-shirt on for it as well. Be hopeful. I do. I feel like I'm feeling uplifted, and it's midweek. And usually by Wednesday, you start, don't you? Most people do. We get a bit but I'm feeling very hopeful. Yeah,
good,
full of it. Oh, thank you so much. Thank you, Caron, because thank
you for having
what you've
me.
said is very inspirational. I think you're an inspiration, and I think you're helping a lot of people. And yes, I'll get some details as well on the resources page about the 18th of October, so people can go and find it there as well.
Thank you.
Marvelous. Thank you so much, and I will see you again soon. Thank you.